Hello YouTube world, my name is Nicholas Montez and you're watching my YouTube channel, The Teenage... no, not The Teenage Movie Critic. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get used to saying The Movie Archivist. Please forgive me. I forgot this was alive. My bad. Welcome back to The Movie Archivist, everybody. And in today's video, today's live stream, we are doing a tier list. Ranking all 31 Pixar films with the release of Toy Story 5, as well as Pixar's Hoppers. I don't think I did a tier list back then for Hoppers, when Hoppers came out, but with that said, let's just go ahead and get started talking about all Pixar films. Most of you guys already know most of my thoughts on this, but, I got some different perspectives on some of these movies. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll kick things off. Of course, we're doing this in release order, by the way, starting with the original Toy Story. Now, this is a film that is kind of conflicting because overall, I love this movie. I love the Toy Story movies. I love all the movies. However, when it comes to the first one, it's very conflicting for me of where I always want to place it because overall, I do love the movie. But I tend to go back to the sequels more, like Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3. And I think the reason why is because they're actually a lot more fun. And they actually have a lot more adventure to them. And those are my kinds of stories that I like going back to. Whereas the first Toy Story, it's basically like a buddy movie between Buzz and Woody. Which, of course, I really like it. And it, especially going into the production of the movie of how it was made. And, like, that Woody was kind of more angry back then. It was kind of interesting in the way they made it. And the fact that even in the final product, you can see how some of that stuff is still there. And it worked really well. But at the same time, just crafting this world of toys and how, like, the fact that they actually have a life once the child leaves the room. That's such a unique, like, thing for it. And overall, it's just fun. It's funny. It's colorful. And the entire, like, the whole setup of it, from where we get, as soon as we get introduced to Buzz Lightyear, it's so peak. The whole story structure of it is so great. The writing is so peak. So, easily, I'm putting Toy Story, I'm putting it in the A tier. Now, on Letterboxd, it's probably going to look a little different for me for my ranking. But as for a tier list, this is where I would go. Because while I do love this movie, I kind of need to save it for the other Toy Story movies. So, that's where I'll put it. Next up, we have A Bug's Life. And I will actually be very kind to A Bug's Life. Because, much like Toy Story, which is kind of rare because the comedy of Pixar today doesn't feel a lot like Toy Story. I would say for certain Pixar movies it does. A Bug's Life is in that same category, but the comedy actually really works. To where it actually feels like modern day Pixar. Modern day Pixar humor. And really because the movie is hilarious as hell. Like, there's so many bug jokes that are funny. All the characters are funny, but also the story is kind of unique and interesting. So, granted, is it the best Pixar movie? No. But I found myself kind of enjoying it a good bit. So I'll put this one in B tier. Then we have Toy Story 2. In my honest opinion, I think Toy Story 2 is easily just like one of the best Pixar movies up to date. This was a Pixar film that I rewatched so much growing up that, like, I instantly fell in love with it. And coming back to what I said about the first Toy Story, that the first movie kind of lacked that adventure, the threats, the adventure side of things, while balancing the emotional core. But at the same time, there isn't really an emotional core in Toy Story. It was more of like a character flaw that Woody needed to learn, and like you didn't care about it as much. You like the character, you like the journey he goes on, but it didn't feel as personal or emotional. Toy Story 2 is somehow able to bring in this adventure side of things where you have this side story with Buzz Lightyear and the other toys with Ham, Rex, Slinky, and Potato Head. But then you also have Woody finding out for himself of who he truly is, and also getting introduced to Jessie, Bullseye, and Stinky Pete. While they're fun, you also get a really sad story that, like, what if Andy, that time with Andy, as great as it is right now, it's going to end one day. And that realization is now coming to Woody. And it's just a really great story in the way they crafted it. And it's so crazy how you can go one moment from enjoying this film so much, and then you can just kind of be crying with When She Loved Me starts playing. It's such a unique way. Like, I feel like that's the part of, like, a movie that makes it so great is, like, this is how you know it's a peak Pixar movie. Pixar reached peak because they knew that it wasn't just a fun story. It could be something more that can be relatable for anybody. And I truly love the movie. Plus, also, this movie made Buzz Lightyear awesome. I mean, obviously, Buzz Lightyear was always my favorite character in the Toy Story movies, but this one made him immediately awesome with the whole Buzz Lightyear utility belt Buzz. I loved him. Next up, we have Monsters, Inc. And much like Toy Story, I think that this is another great Pixar movie. A lot of these Pixar films are really good. And as for Monsters, Inc., it's another amazing one. You know, Billy Crystal and John Goodman have great chemistry with one another. But also, just the idea of monsters scaring children to power their city. It's an interesting idea that kind of takes some dark turns, has some nice heart, has some good humor. But at the same time, you know, unlike these other films, it doesn't quite strike me as these other movies, but it is still highly entertaining because it is Pixar. So, still going to put this in A. Next up, we have Finding Nemo, which in my opinion is the best Pixar production that Pixar's ever made because it literally is. And most of that goes to really, it probably has some of the best looking animation by far. I mean, this movie came out like 23 years ago, and it still looks good. All the water looks still believable. It still looks believable. But also, it's not even just the animation and the fun characters. It's also just the emotional story that happens with this movie. Similar to what I thought was interesting with the first Toy Story, where the production of it and how it originally was going to be for that movie. Finding Nemo was also an interesting thing because the opening scene of the movie originally wasn't going to be that in the opening scene. It was going to be like in the middle of the movie, or we were going to get called back to it, and the movie was just going to start with Marlin being such an overprotective father, and we never really knew why until like later on in the movie. To be honest, I feel like if you released a Pixar movie like that today, and if you did that sort of thing today, it probably would have worked either. It would have worked either way, because like you can be introduced to a character, why are they acting like this, and then get the story later on. It will make I feel like it will make sense either way, unless you do it well. But as for Finding Nemo, it is a top tier Pixar film. I absolutely love Finding Nemo. So yeah, it's also one of my favorite films of all time. So I gotta put it in the S tier. We then have The Incredibles. And The Incredibles is also kind of a frustrating one because overall the movie is fantastic. You know, I struggled because like I tend to like the second Incredibles a lot more, and it's gonna be like a lot higher on the list. And the first Incredibles isn't gonna go low. It's actually gonna go pretty high. I'm just gonna spoil it here, putting it in A tier. I love The Incredibles. I think it is a great Pixar movie. I think what this movie does very uniquely well is the fact that they actually made a superhero film to where, this was the first time where Pixar actually did a story and movie with humans. Where, up to this point they did toys, bugs, monsters, and fish, and now they're doing humans, and it works. And, telling that being the first superhero story in this universe is really cool. Having this family of superheroes, and telling this story with this man who wants to relive his glory days. I mean, who doesn't want to relive his glory days? Plus, even though the animation of the humans still doesn't look the best, I like the animation and the way it kind of does lighting and the color scheme of all the scenes. It works really well. And also a lot of the action is great, and the score from Michael Giacchino is also fantastic. So there's just a lot of great things that this movie does, and I think it's overall an expertly well crafted film. However, I think the last half of the movie, basically the third act, is kind of weak. Now, I'm not talking about the battle with the robots, with the robot in the city. I love that scene. I love that fight. The stuff with Syndrome and the Underminer cliffhanger, I think, is a little bit weakened. Though that's kind of why I like Incredibles 2 more, because it actually uncovers that superheroes are still illegal, and how are we going to solve that? So I think it works a lot better with that. But with the first Incredibles, I think it's great. I just think that note just kind of makes it a little bit negative. So then we have Cars, and Cars, I'm gonna be honest, it's a fine movie. Like, I don't really know what else to say about it. It's fine. You know, I'm not crazy about it. You're not crazy about it. Let's just leave it at that. You know, it's the characters are fun. I've learned to like the characters. I think they're iconic, classic kid characters. If anything, people don't go for Toy Story or Finding Nemo or even Monsters Inc. Kids go for Cars because they like cars. They like race cars. They like that stuff. And Cars does a simple job. But I also think that's why it works as a kid's story, but it's not my favorite Pixar movie. It's just not. If anything, it's probably the best well-told kids movie that actually is a story for kids. Though there are a lot of jokes that kind of go over kids' heads, but we're not going to talk about that. Ratatouille. Ratatouille is probably one of the most unique Pixar movies ever made, and it comes close to even being one of my absolute favorites. And I think it's because it's like, first off, it's another Brad Bird film, and like he has all the choreography with the rat and everything and the chases. But what's also brilliant is the fact that the movie can be incredibly hilarious because it's such a bizarre premise, but it has such a great message about cooking and takes this story seriously. It kind of reminded me of Kung Fu Panda in a way, where it's like, it's got all the humor and jokes you want from it, but at its core, it's also a very serious story. And I don't know, there's just something so compelling about that. So honestly, I gotta put Ratatouille in the S tier. Like, this movie was peak Pixar at its finest. WALL-E is a movie that I don't really care for. Now I will be rewatching it this year as I'm doing my ultimate cinema list, and honestly, it's got to go in C. But honestly, if I rewatch WALL-E this year, I don't know if it'll go higher. We'll see what happens when Godot comes out if I re-rank the Pixar movies. But you know, the animation, WALL-E as a character is fine, but I just don't care for this movie as much. We then have Up. Up is another fantastic film. The opening sequence of this movie is probably like one of the most peak Pixar opening scenes. Well, not opening scenes, but like first 10 minutes of the movie. It's so awesome. It's so emotional. Now, while I think the rest of the movie is very emotional, but also very funny and all that great stuff, the actual experience of it feels a little bit flimsy. I think the rest of the plot of it doesn't really work as much. You know, Doug is a great character, but at the same time, I still really enjoy it. I still love the premise. I still love it. So I still got to put this one in the A tier. Not quite S tier, but it's going A tier. We then have Toy Story 3, which, much like Up, this is another achievement from Pixar that, honestly, it is kind of crazy that this movie actually worked. Because you had the first Toy Story, which started all of this. Then you had Toy Story 2, which was the best sequel of Pixar's history. And Toy Story 3 kind of just blows it out of the water and just says, we're going to make possibly the best movie out there possible, because we haven't seen these characters in over 10 years. Over 11 years. And so they actually made one of the best Pixar movies ever made, in my opinion. And I think what made it so great was the fact that you just had like such a great story, a great premise, where you're bringing these toys into, you know, what is their next stage in life. Now Andy's going to college. Do they go in the attic, which is kind of representation for heaven? Are they going to get thrown out? Are they getting donated to like somewhere else? Or are they going to go to a daycare, which is something they decided to choose, which they thought would be the better option, but actually turns out daycare is not a paradise, it's a prison. And the character of Lotso Huggin' Bear, awesome villain, probably the best Toy Story villain by far, and just everything about it, from the intensity, the emotions, from the incinerator scene, the whole prison vibe of the film is great. The fact that all the characters, just kind of all the toys get to have great moments in the film. The entire movie is just well done, so brilliant. And it is a movie that I will say it's S tier. I gotta say, it's not quite as good as Toy Story 2 or these other three films, because unlike that's the reason why I like Toy Story 2 more, because it actually like makes stuff better, to where what Toy Story 3 lacks is it lacks some of the fun and charm of the first two films, where the third one is more serious and disturbing rather than being another fun adventure. I understand why it's not as fun, because they're going through dark stuff, but I think maybe that's why I just don't like it as much, because it's like you really don't get that fun playtime like you do in the other movies. So yeah, but I think Toy Story 3 is an absolute like masterpiece of a movie. I think it's fantastic. We then have Cars 2, and I think Cars 2 is easily the worst Pixar film, while still having some sort of enjoyable elements to it. I can't say that this is a top tier one. I can't say that, like, do I enjoy some of the elements of it? Yeah, but that's all I can really say. Next up, we have Brave. Brave is a brilliant... Okay, actually, it's not brilliant. I'm sorry. I'm praising Pixar films too much. Brave is an okay movie. Now, the animation style of it, I think, is really cool. Though, you can say that 2 years before this, a film called How to Train Your Dragon came out, and that actually did a lot better. But I still thought it was a pretty entertaining time, while the story isn't all that amazing. Monsters University. Monsters University is a film that, honestly, I actually did kind of like. Because, it's kind of like Pixar. Let's tell a prequel story starring the two monsters from Monsters, Inc. And we're going to also, but not only that, but we're also going to give you the best college movie from Pixar that Pixar's ever put out. Probably the only college movie that they have ever put out. And in my opinion, I think it works great values. Like the fact that, all days now, my class is now going to college and everything. And I just see all these reels on TikTok, talking about, this shit about to be like Monsters University. Where's the scare games? And it's just so, it's so nostalgic for people to actually, like, still remember this movie. And even, like, with the score from Randy Newman, and it's kind of like a marching band, like, all that stuff is just so good. As for the film itself, it has the fun of Pixar. It has, like, all the fun characters. It has, like, the scare games are really fun. The score, once again, is great. But at the same time, I think this is also the perfect example of what Pixar... Like, in many ways, I think Monsters University is probably more enjoyable and entertaining than Monsters, Inc. because it actually resembles what Pixar really is all about, in that what Pixar does so well, different from Disney, is that these aren't fairy tales. These aren't, these characters have a goal. They have, I want something, and they're going to achieve it by the end and live happily ever after. These movies, because they're photorealistic, it's kind of a representation of what these films are with being computer animated, that because it's like photorealistic, it's, being realistic, they have to be realistic with their plots. That in this movie, Mike wants to be a scary monster, but he never really gets there. And it kind of hones on that, but what's so brilliant about it is the fact that you're able to change it. And I think that's what makes it so great and brilliant. So, granted, I mean, it's not like a top-tier Pixar film for me or anything, because it's like, there are some weak elements and some continuity errors and stuff like that with the, like, Abominable Snowman and, Randall. But overall, I do really like this movie, and I think it's honestly one of the better structured Pixar movies, that you finally understand what Pixar is all about up to this point in time, and what movies that they have been doing since 1995 with Toy Story. We then have Inside Out. This is no game-brainer. Inside Out is peak cinema. The fact that they were able to the fact that Pixar was able to create a story about emotions controlling your lives, but in many ways, in my opinion, this is better than the first Toy Story, because it has all the lively humor, it has all the colorful characters, and while, you don't have as much of the adventure because you don't really need it. And I think what makes it so great is like all the characters are actually used well. They're even if they're used in antagonistic ways, they're done in unique ways. And even with exploring sadness and joy and all that, it's done better in this movie, but also the world of Riley's mind is also so inventive and creative. But also, much like Up and some of these other films, it's also incredibly emotional. Pun intended. So, I truly believe this is a Pixar masterpiece. The reason why it's not in the top two, or even the number one spot, Finding Nemo was better, but also, I think the final resolution of making Riley's new islands and stuff, which at first I didn't realize that's what was going on in the finale, that when sadness came back, they weren't bringing back the core memories, they were making a new island that represented something that represented her growth and her change. And I thought that was really inventive. The part that I don't really get, that also kind of leads into Inside Out 2, but I kind of ignore it, is how on earth are there different, how are there different memories mixed in with different kinds of emotions? I still don't get it. It's been 10 years, 11 years since the first Inside Out came out, and I still don't understand how that works. I kind of get it with the first the first memory that happened with joy and sadness, because, it's kind of a happy memory, but it's also kind of sad because, it's a mixture of both. I understand that, but how they explain it in other films, I don't know. The Good Dinosaur. The Good Dinosaur is it's a film like Brave, in my opinion, where it's they just didn't, I think it's a pretty beautiful movie, but it's just so drained by, just these cartoonish stuff. So I'll put this one in D. We then have Finding Dory. And Finding Dory, much like Monsters University and A Bug's Life, this is another film that I highly find enjoyable and entertaining and rewatchable, because what made this movie so incredibly rewatchable was just, I love the Finding Nemo world. Whereas Finding Nemo is peak cinema, Finding Dory is just so heartfelt, so entertaining, all the characters are likable, but also I did actually like exploring the story of Dory and finding her parents and all that stuff, and I found that story to be captivating. And yeah, we don't get as much of the Nemo characters as much as we want to, with Mr. Ray in the class or Crush in the sea turtles, but we get a lot of fun new characters, and yeah, we get to spend some time with Marlin and Nemo, but honestly, with the new characters that came in, I can actually forgive that they're not in it as much, because then again, this is Dory's story, and it's not Nemo or Marlin's story. Granted, I'm hoping maybe in Finding Nemo 3, if they're going to make one, they balance that out better. But overall, it doesn't have that same problem that I have with, Cars 2, which Cars 2 I don't even care about because I hate that movie. But also, it doesn't have that problem that I have with, the Toy Story sequels, where they just kind of ignore the background characters, which I thought was kind of weird. So I'm going to put this one in B. Then we have Cars 3. I think this movie's fine. Nothing really special about it. It's fine. I do like the Cruz Ramirez character, and the animation and the racing scenes are pretty intact, but that's all I have to say about that. Now we have Coco. Coco is a movie that, much like Finding Nemo or Toy Story 2 or any other Pixar movie, Coco is a movie that at times I get obsessed with, because this is the true example of what Pixar was able to do. Hold up, I need a drink. Coco is the best example of what Pixar is able to do, where, first off, this is the first, cultural movie where they actually started doing movies based off culture. But at the same time, it also mixes, this is the perfect blend of what I'm talking about with Pixar. The fact that they can make such a fun movie with a good plot, and at the same time, they can make a plot that's just so emotional and so, it's such a great story and such a great theme. And That's what Pixar does best, and this movie does it best. Now, I'm going to put this one in the S tier, but here's the thing. I do think this movie is kind of predictable when you rewatch it, and that makes it a little bit weak a little bit. But I can overall say this movie is a masterpiece, and every single time I rewatch it, it just gets better on rewatch. So, because of being a little bit predictable, I'm putting this one in the S tier between Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3. Next up, we have Incredibles 2. And it's kind of frustrating of where I want to put it, because you obviously know I love it more than the first one. But as for me, I think I might put this in S tier. And the only reason I'm putting it in S tier is because I just think that this is an incredible movie. Pun intended. To where, essentially, this one just focuses in on superheroes are illegal, how are we going to fix that? And for me, I thought it worked really nicely. To where it's focusing on, where it actually has a nice plot, where Elastigirl is out going on saving the world with proper action sequences, where it's not just doing 9/11s all the time. And then at the smaller side, you also have Bob back at home caring for the kids, while also trying to fix the daughter, and then also trying to handle Jack as he just got powers. So honestly, it's the kind of movie that, like, you think of the premise and all the stuff that you love from the first Incredibles. It's so much fun. It's so entertaining. Now, is it quite as original? Does it have quite as great of a story? I don't know if I would really say that, but I think that this movie also proves that, like, of what Bob said at the beginning, like, these kids have to make the choice. Like, can they save, can they protect each other well? And taking that stuff, what we saw in the first Incredibles, this movie does it better. So, yeah, I would say that it does have better theming. So, Incredibles 2, awesome. And now we have Toy Story 4, which, of course, a lot of people just do not like about this movie. I don't really know why people hate this movie. I mean, I understand people say, you know, these movies should have ended at 3. And I understand that. But at the same time, every single time I rewatch this movie, I just like it a little bit more. From the opening scene with rescuing RC, but then realizing, oh wait, this isn't just a random toy rescue. This is the origins of what happened to Bo Peep, and why she wasn't in 3. And the way they really animated that, the way they handled that, it's one of the most emotional things that Pixar's ever created. And then you get to the present day with Bonnie, and you realize, oh, Bonnie doesn't care for Woody anymore. And I guess I'm not going to say it makes sense, but at the same time, it's like, it's a natural progression because, you know, your kid's not going to love a toy forever. But at the same time, it's also establishing that Woody's purpose is changing. That he can't just go from one kid and care for this new one. He kind of has to change it up. And when we meet back with Bo, she's a completely changed person. She's not just caring for one kid. She's kind of going all over the place and caring for other toys, caring for other kids, all around the world. And it's like, that's insane. And I love it. And at the same time, like, yeah, the other toys, they're not in it as much, which, yeah, I'm still a little disappointed with that. I don't really like the way they used Buzz in the movie, even though he had some solid moments. But at the same time, like, even the new characters we got, Duke-a-Boom, Giggle McDimples, Ducky and Bunny, our villain, Gabby was also really well established. Even Forky, played by Tony Hale, he was also great. Forky was also fun. Though I did not like that he was used as a plot device, I still think that this is really one of Pixar's, like, visually, it is one of the best looking Pixar films. Story-wise, it's great. There are some weak elements here and there, but I do gotta say, it is a phenomenal movie that I absolutely love it, and it continues the Toy Story franchise really well. And it does kind of make sense that Woody had to leave from the gang. So, overall, I love Toy Story 4, and I'm putting this one in the A tier. We then have Onward, which now we enter the 2020s of Pixar films with Onward. And I'm going to put this goodly enough in the B tier. Yeah, I'll put it here. I think Onward is a really good Pixar movie. I think it's fun. It's entertaining. Chris Pratt and Tom Holland have great chemistry with one another. The animation's pretty good. And the story, it's pretty nice. It's pretty simple. We then have Soul. I think Soul is very good. I think the animation is great. I think on rewatch, every time it just gets better every time. From the jokes, it's solid Pixar comedy, but at the same time, like, even though it doesn't develop the world of the Soul world as much, I still liked what they did with making this story about just living life. You don't have to live life on a purpose. Just live life and see where things go. And I think that's a beautiful way to tell a story. That's the kind of story that Pixar really needs. And in many ways, I think with the 2020s, that's what Pixar has really been all about. That, like, every few years, Pixar's been, like, putting out these movies, like, especially in this decade, where I think that with Soul, even though we had a few meh Pixar films over the last few years, the good ones are actually telling good messages for people that are actually saying something about life. Soul said something about COVID and living life because people were dying and being stuck in the house and kind of like wanting to end their lives. Inside Out 2 kind of focuses on the transition from, middle school to high school. Hoppers kind of focuses on, like, you need to protect the environment because the environment is good. It's good for us. And then Toy Story 5 kind of focuses on that, like, you need to go back outside, play with toys. But at the same time, technology can still be good. But we'll talk about those other movies in a little bit. As for Soul, I think this is a brilliant Pixar movie. So easily, this is one of my absolute favorites. It's going S tier. We have Luca. Luca is a fun Pixar movie. It is fun. I really enjoy it. It's very, very entertaining, very fun characters. I'm going to put this one in B. I like it. It's a good Pixar movie. We then have Turning Red. And Turning Red is, it's mixed. Because I think there are elements I do like about this movie. But, the animation is good. The Four Town song is cool. The characters are lively. But I just think that since this was like the first attempt to try to do a teenager story, I don't know if I really cared about it as much. And I think with some of these other movies like Inside Out 2, Hoppers, they kind of did it better. So I'll put this one in C tier for me. Then we have Lightyear. Oh my god, this is so disappointing. I was so wanting to love Lightyear because, as you know, I'm a big Toy Story fan. I love Buzz Lightyear as a character. He's my favorite character. And then we get into this movie, and he's just like, the entire movie does not feel the vibe of what we felt like with Buzz in the Toy Story films. He's just I'm not complaining about the whole time dilation storyline. I am okay with that storyline. The problem that I hate is the fact that we have to spend time with all these other stuff. These characters are so lame. Zurg is terrible, and Buzz doesn't even have his own suit in the movie, and he doesn't even have his wings. He gets it like by the end. So easily. Now, there are some things I do kind of enjoy. I enjoy the animation. I enjoy the score from Michael Giacchino. And like I said, the story is good, but it's not really something I want for a Buzz Lightyear movie. So D. Elemental. Elemental is one that I think is great, and it's a simple idea to where it's like, just creating this world of elements with fire, water, earth, everything. And just believe, but also, while believing in this world, you also get to believe in the characters. And honestly, like some of these other movies, it just gets better on rewatch, to where it's highly entertaining. It's also pretty funny at times, too. And it has but at the same time, it's also Pixar doing a rom-com with these element characters. And I really enjoyed that stuff. The specific, a whole, like, stakes at the end were, like, the water guy. I forgot what the water guy's name is. Jake or something? I don't know. I think that the stakes of it didn't really need to be needed. They weren't needed. So, in my opinion, I think, Elemental is B tier. Overall, it's the best one of B tier. We then have Inside Out 2, and in my opinion, I think this is probably the best Pixar film that they've made since Soul, honestly. Because, truthfully, this felt like classic Pixar for me, where a classic Pixar sequel where they kept all the style of the world, they kept all the characters, all the fun, all the charm, but at the same time mixed something interesting where they're introducing new characters, and like the first film where we're focusing on sadness and joy, this time we're focusing on anxiety and how it can be good, but it can also be bad for kids, and how it's not entirely bad, but it does kind of do some good. And the way they were able to create that story and making a story about anxiety is something so moving. But even then, what's also so fascinating about it is the fact that as a movie in and of itself, even though our main emotions from the first movie, they have their own emotions. It like I said, anxiety can be both good and bad. Our emotions can be both good and bad. Whether that's literally when on the board, on the council and controlling Riley. But even as people, probably some of the best moments in the film is probably one of my favorite characters in the movie besides joy and sadness was anger, where in the first movie, he went through a lot of stuff, almost making Riley run away. And in this movie, he seems pretty angry, but he seems a lot more mature, he worked on himself. He's angry because that's his emotion, that's who he is, but he somehow worked on himself and was able to be a lot nicer and somehow able to be part of the group. I'm just thinking about this movie makes me so emotional because I'm I loved Inside Out, and the way they were able to create this, it's to me, it still feels like a fever dream that this movie was still able to work and happen. It's so good. I freaking love Inside Out 2. And also the movie is incredibly funny. It was so entertaining. Oh my god, I want to go back to this time. 2020, early summer 2024 was just so peak for so many reasons. Elio. So now we have Elio. Elio is interesting because I think there are some elements that kind of worked. But what was the whole point of doing this story about a boy that wants to get abducted by aliens? I just thought it was such a weird story for a movie. So I'm going to put this one in C tier. Now, the big question is as to where it will go. I'm probably going to put it at the bottom of C tier. And now we're on to our last two movies with Hoppers and Toy Story 5. So Hoppers, I actually think is probably one of the best Pixar movies they've released in years. And I think the reason what makes it so great is really just the whole world. I think what made it so awesome, so entertaining, is that, first off, it actually, kind of like some of these other films, it has a pretty good message going for it. It's got, good messaging with, protecting nature and stuff. But it also has, really funny humor. It's it kind of feels back to classic Pixar of how it was before, but it's not afraid to be silly, and I kind of like that. But it also has some pretty good messaging, has some pretty good stakes, and pretty much everything is meant to be silly, and I'm how am I supposed to take this stuff seriously? But then it can kind of go into, some of those scaly type things, which I thought was kind of awesome and cool. So overall, this movie was honestly a blast. I'm putting this one in S tier. This to me was top tier Pixar. It's just one of those ideas that just worked so well for Pixar that it's I loved it and I can't wait to rewatch it again. And now finally we have Toy Story 5. And for what I can say with this movie and how I'll be able to rate it, I think this movie is very good. I think it is I'm gonna turn my camera around for this one. I think Toy Story 5 is a very good sequel to Toy Story. I think focusing in on iPad kids and focusing more on Bonnie and how that affects her along with her friends, I think that was kind of an interesting story, and her having development by the end by becoming friends with the Blaze character, that was cool. But also doing the story with Jessie and making her story relevant and kind of continuing that and going back to it, I thought was kind of interesting, but also just kind of, once again, explore, it kind of has that classic Pixar feel in doing these kinds of stories that were kind of going back to these obscure characters. And, you know, Jessie's one of the best characters of Pixar, so kind of going back to her house and everything and exploring all this stuff, all of it, and the, like, her whole story with it was just so good, and the way it relates to technology, it was so compelling. Of course, classic Pixar humor with Buzz and Woody. New characters were fun. The animation with during playtime was really cool, and just makes you feel that while technology is somewhat good in some ways, it can be also bad in some ways. And I really like that messaging. Now, I'm not going to say, like I said, it is not a Pixar classic. It's not a classic Toy Story movie, but you know, the pacing is a little bit off at times. I think the inclusion of the Buzz Lightyears, while they have really good funny scenes, they just don't really play well in the movie compared to the utility belt Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story 2. But overall, I think that this is a very good movie. As to where I'm going to rate it, I actually have no idea. I think it is, for me, the weakest Toy Story movie. But I think for me, I'm going to put this one, I'm putting this one in B. Let me show you. It's going to go in B between Monsters University and A Bug's Life. It could change either way, but overall, that is kind of my list for now. And also, don't get the S tier mixed up, because it's not going to be like that in the Letterboxd ranking, trust me. Toy Story is still my top 5, or my top 10, most definitely. But as for that, that's just kind of how I feel. But overall, these are my tier list of all 31 Pixar films. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And comment down below, what are your favorite Pixar movies, and where does Toy Story 5 fit in your Pixar tier list? And I'll see you guys later. Peace.